Welcome to Buddhaland Podcast. I'm Stacy. Today I'm joined by Monica. Monica Laura Smith is an Italo-Afro-American holistic educator born in Turin who lives and works between Europe and Asia. Her work bridges artistic practice, embodied awareness, and philosophical inquiry with integral philosophy as its core framework. Thank you so much for joining us today, Monica. Yeah, I'd love to start with your personal journey. You have spent decades working with disciplines that are ancient, contemplative, and not always part of the mainstream. How did you first find your way into these paths? Was there a person, experience, or inner turning point that guided you in this direction?
Well, it was a bit of all of these things because I was traveling with my mother when I was very young, and she was traveling to East. Like we went to Afghanistan when it was the 72, So I was 15 at the time. And then we went, every summer we traveled for 3 months because this was the summer holiday in Italy. So these factors were very important. First of all, because I was able to go in places that influenced me a lot from the point of view of being so, can I say, so far away from my culture. And when you are a teenager, you are in a very sensitive moment, okay? So to spend a lot of time away from my peers, same age, and spending a lot of time with adults in these unbelievable, beautiful places and be exposed to a different, not only landscape and culture, but also spirituality. Because in those region of the world, and it is maybe now is extremely different, but you, especially in India, what I discovered was this number of deities and the respect and worshipping of nature, was not something that I was able to see in Italy. So the first things I think was this strong experience in these very sensitive years of my life. I was 15, between 15 and 17. And then another important moment was when my project to work with art as a publisher of artist book. I was 30 at the time, I was trying to find my way in the family business, let's put it this way. And at that point, this doesn't work at all for me. It wasn't my way of staying in the world, So at that point, I had a very big setback, those moments in which you see everything's black in your life and you need to change something. And that's the moment, the turning point, for me. When I met my mentor, and then she became my mentor for many, many years, And she introduced me to astrology that was very far from my interest at that point, because I have my spirituality approach was more on the line of the Indian philosopher like Krishnamurti or the Zen philosophy, but astrology was far from me. But with this ability that she had to really touch the heart of the person, and this deep spirituality that was very alive in her. She made me understand that my talents and my ability that I was trying to spend in the art field with the artist was better addressed to a therapeutic approach to my profession. And so I started to study shiatsu and everything, And I studied with her, but I studied shiatsu and I became a shiatsu practitioner because she was very, even if she was very spiritually oriented, she was 80 at the time. She wasn't young, she was already, a wise woman. And so she was very practical also. And so she told me, you have to earn your life. And this is very, very popular in Italy at the moment. And so you can put together your interest for philosophy and for spirituality in a very practical approach. That is the Shatsu that I start to practice, and I practice for more than 10 years. But the point is, as you say, experiential by traveling so young, and the turning point, so a big setback, and the moment in which you are more open, probably, someone can enter in your life and change it forever.
Yeah, I think the turning point seemed to happen a bit later than I thought. I thought maybe you started with your interest very early on, more seriously, but I did not know that you actually had a career with artists and also publishing.
Yeah, because I was cultivating this interest for spirituality as a private things. Because,
Hmm.
as I told you, traveling so young away from my peers. So whenever I came back to Italy after 3 months being exposed to a totally different culture, this spirituality didn't find a space with my friend, that they have a completely different life. So it was more an inner aspect of my life. And so I was reading, I was following workshop, I was doing things not as a professional career. These arrived when everything's failed, in the outer world. And that's why she was very pivotal. She was pivotal because she told me, but you have all these, and why don't you
Hmm.
spend it, and instead of trying to follow the step of your family that are not for you.
Yeah. So there was not, I mean, that was a spiritual moment, but also for on a personal level, I think it was very important to understand your own potential and path for this life.
Yeah. Is
Uh,
because especially mm, between what I realized after studying, astrology and many other and psychology, what I understand is that in these years when you are between the, I don't know, 18, 20 and 30, 31, you still try to adjust to the expectation of your family, of your culture, of the external
Society.
expectation. Yeah. You don't I mean, then something happened, and it's not always something that do what happened to me. For everyone, is a different moment, But when you are 30, or just little before and little after, it is a pivotal moment because you feel adult in a different way uh, comparing to when you are 15. When you are 15, you want to conquer the world because you want to go out, and I'm ready, And in that moment, I was in a different situation. And but this you can find it in every life. There are moments, cycle of life in which doors open and change happens.
Yeah. The Saturn return in astrology.
In astrology, it is the Saturn return.
Mm.
Is in reality when you are really more mature,
Mm.
comparing to when you have the first encounter with Saturn when you are 14 or 15.
Yeah, so that personal calling eventually led you to formal training. So you studied at the Center for Psychological Astrology, founded by Liz Green and Howard Cespedes. It is a discipline rooted in Jungian psychology, a very important school. And could you please share what psychological astrology is and how it differs from more traditional forms of astrology?
Well, for me, the years I spent in London, 5 years I spent in London in the academy, in the Academy of Leeds Green, because it was important because the first year I studied with my mentor were more oriented in spirituality, theosophy, anthroposophy as a base of the teaching. While I realized that studying with someone that has this approach and and the fact that she was 90 at the time when I went to London to study at the CPA. So I realized that there was a something missing because when you are 90, you see life from a different point of view. Somehow, you are not so interested in the turmoil of 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 people that are still young. Or me, that I wasn't so young at the time anymore, and my client, So if I really want to address this aspect of the more deep psychological aspect, I need a different way of learning, So the psychological Jungian aspect was close to my experience because in the younger years, I've been in therapy myself for a few years. And so this was also what made me understand that the aspect of spirituality are fundamental, but they cannot answer to all phases of your life. And so the risk sometimes is to do a kind of spiritual bypassing, and to try to solve all your problem with a spiritual approach. While in the school of Litz Green, first of all, it was very important to be able to spend a lot of time with people who were studying the same subject, arriving from a lot of other places in the world. And also because you were working on your chart in order to understand the teaching, but in the same time, you are not in therapy. So it was an in-between space, And Jungian approach is extremely oriented to archetypes. So you start to recognize some patterns in your life, and then you recognize those patterns in other people's life. So this archetypal deep psychology is key in the teaching of the CPA, and is also key in the work of Jung, of course. That is the inspired a return of astrology after years in which astrology was just for the magazine and for a superficial approach, or forget or considered a kind of superstition. So Jung was pivotal, and after in the 60s, all the people like Litz Green and supporters and many other, but before them also another important scholar that is Dan Rudier. They bring back astrology with a more sound grounding approach. And this is what attracted me. And I think that this is the key aspect of this kind of approach to astrology, that is less about prediction and is more about having a map of your psychological, emotional, and mental dimension, So it is filling a gap, I think, from your regular life and look on life and your aspiration to a better life and more balanced life and a more spiritual life, And between these elements, the psychological astrology is an Jungian approach, but for me it was through astrology, are extremely useful, I think. And they are, I don't know if I answered to your question, but this is, my take.
Yeah, I think you did. Also, you raised a very interesting point. I think when we talk about spirituality, sometimes it can be quite general. It doesn't answer my question specifically. It doesn't understand my situation specifically. I think with psychological astrology, it provides kind of maybe a bridge. It doesn't conflict to the spiritual pursuit. It helps us to identify the patterns, the self-sabotage, and then we can untangle that and then continue on our spiritual path. Yeah, I think that's a very helpful perspective. So could you give us an example either of yourself or of someone that how psychological astrology helped them?
A scholar that I think is very important in this field is Dan Rudier. And I always start from his teaching. When I do a session, I try to point out the aspect of how detached we are from nature and from natural cycles. And astrology, it is about cycles, because you look at your chart, but your chart is just a snapshot of a moment in which you was born. But then the planets go on moving, and so you can see that the life, your own life, started at birth and is your own independent life, okay? Because you're separate from your mother, and you start to breathe with your lungs, and this is the beginning of a series of cycles that are important in your life. And the first one is about the moon for many reasons. But the most important is that if you talk with a client about the moon and the moon cycle, you help the person to connect with the moon as something real outside, Many times the client come back and say, I never looked at the moon before in this way, because the sky is a huge watch, clock, and so you really can see the different cycle that interact one to the other, and you see that you have this same cycle in yourself, from the smallest, that is the moon cycle, an emotional, physical, and more relation to the moon is more physical, and also the other things that I explain, and I think is important to notice, is that the sun and the moon are the two luminaries that are really affecting our life, in the sense of, when we talk the influence of the planet. So when you learn that there are two kind of the influence, the first influence is very concrete and practical, because we have the moon, the tides, and the wine. In Italy, we take much care about the moon when we yeah. So, and the sun with the seasons, and so the equinox and the solstice, and so these are ways of having a direct influence. And then there is the influence of the cycle of time. So, for example, let's take Saturn, because we were talking about Saturn. So if the moon takes 28 days and Saturn take 30 years, 29 years, they have the same pace, but the moon is every month. And the Saturn has a longer space between one cycle start and flourish and start again, So you start to have instruments that are to observe life, to be more in contact with nature, inside and outside. So this is make the person be able to rely on their own experience. So I try to create a bridge between astrology as a cold technique and the experience of the person, the real living experience. The moment you create this bridge, then astrology became something different, It's something that you can experience. And that, yes, I can help you to orientate yourself. And then we talk about psychological patterns, family patterns, and about work, about the relationship, about everything. But it became something that is more connected to your life, not as, an abstract subject. And in this way, you are less prone to superstition, because you understand why this is meaningful, because you are a human being and you live in nature. You're an aspect of nature.
Yes, indeed. I think, of course, astrology is being very popular, but most people's understanding are different zodiac signs and reading them on magazines or on websites. But to actually establish these connections with the planets around us, I think that's a very helpful start.
Yeah, I think so, because it makes it less dependent from the astrologer. So because it became something you can perceive and you can observe, then there is really a bridge, and then is more fruitful.
Yeah. And your work does not stop there. Actually, it continues to evolve. And so currently, sound and vibration is also a major part of your work. Could you tell us how sound entered your path, and how do you use sound to support others? And what kind of inner experience does it make possible that words or signs cannot?
Well, I was, as I told you, I was a shiatsu practitioner. And because of that, I was invited to work with one of the first women or person who start to work in a deep way with sound, especially with the crystal ball. So I met Awaoshi Kaban in 1998, and she invited me to do Shatsu and astrology to her group because she was taking group for seminar in Bali for 1 or 2 weeks. And so she wanted a therapist with her. And so I was exposed to this unbelievable instrument, that are the crystal balls. But I have a different approach because I was very much into listening jazz, and especially improvised jazz. In the 60s, they connected jazz improvisation to spirituality. Both Sun Ra and Coltrane are very, very much, but many others, but these two, just to give you an example. So when I listened to Crystal Ball, and I was exposed to this experience for a long time because I did many seminars for 2 years or 3 years, I worked with her. So whenever there was a session, I was there, So for me, this was connected more to this approach of jazz improvisation. And for that reason, I start to see that there was something I wanted to explore that was slightly different. So in 2000, I bought my set of crystal. I part from her and her group of people. I continue with my shatsu, but I start also to offer session with sound. In 2008 and 2099, I went to Tibet 2 times. Ever was more crystal ball, so I bring it to me. It was very adventurous because you have to travel with something extremely fragile. I think Tibetan influence because of meditation, because the work with sound, and also the work with vibration, because they pray by moving the prayer wheel. That is a way of energizing. So there are many connections you can do there. I want to stop here, but because it's a longer, subject. But I enter this world of sound, and because I wanted a deeper, more strong foundation, I started to study with Fabien Maman, that was a musician, very well-known bossa nova player, and also acupuncturist. He trained in Japan, so was a proper acupuncturist. So we have these things in common: the sound, love for music, and the traditional Chinese medicine that was an aspect of Shatsu and an aspect of his acupuncture profession. So his academy was the place where I study and I take my diploma, and I was able to create a stronger foundation between the work with sound, the work with the body, and astrology was always there. And the academy, Tanado Academy, the academy of Fabien Maman, was, again, a place where you meet people from all over the world, and they do work with sound, work with color, work with essence. It was extremely formative also to meet so many practitioners. And then there is where I met the musician and sculptor that was doing all the instruments for Fabien Maman. And this is Wolfgang Deinert. And Wolfgang, we became good friends. And soon later, we start also to do projects together. And so we went around Europe and this is where I start to develop my idea. I was working with him, and he was my mentor. And because I learned, I was bombarding him of questions about everything. And so when we travel, like, for example, we did a workshop in Portugal for 2 weeks. And at that time, we spent a lot of time in the car, a lot of time by myself with him, just talking and so on. And then doing the meditative concert and the work, individual work. So I was able really to ask him so many questions that this helped me a lot, and this was the beginning of my project with Soundgate. So at that point, I became more independent from him, but we still cooperate. So we did several intensive sound gate intensive in Italy in 2005, 2006, 2007, where people can come for spending 3 days with us and with the instrument of Wolfgang that are huge, like some chimes, some set of chimes is 4 meter high. So this is a huge
It's like a
instrument.
temple.
We call it temple with, because it was a sound temple. I mean, you enter in this space, with this chime of 4 meter long. I have one in my back, this is only 30 centimeter. You see, imagine, gong chime. A gong chime is huge. And so he was traveling with the instrument and coming for the intensive. And so for many years I do this. And we went also to London. We were a guest of the Tibet House. And so that was the residence of the Dalai Lama when he was in London. And in that place they have space and they have conference, they have projects. So we were able to perform there and to give, individual sessions. So this was, the way I entered sound was very deep for me, because I think I'm sure that it was because of my interest in jazz and improvisation. Because when you work with this instrument, you have to develop your deep sensitivity. What I mean is that the core of this work is about listening. This is the core of all the work with sound, listening, because this is the only dimension that can bring you in contact with a more meditative. That's why I call it meditation with sound, because I don't see it as a therapy. I see as a inner device to go deeper into meditation. And so for me, Soundgate is mostly about listening and go deep into yourself in the state of meditation. And sound is perfect because sound is in between being something tangible and intangible, because yes, it's a vibration. Yes, you feel it with your body, but you don't see it because it's just the movement of the air. When you work with energy, you work with something intangible, but at the same time, very, very real. Yeah. And sound is the same things. When you work with chi and when you work with sound, chi is even more subtle because you cannot hear it, okay? But you feel it. And sound, you can feel it and hear it, but you cannot touch it really. You don't have 1 kilo of sound, okay? So sound is, and for me that I was working a lot with astrology at that point, because I was working less with the shatsu because give me less opportunity to work with the spiritual evolutionary dimension, of the transformation or the process of individuation, like Jung talked about it. So I was very much into talking. And you say, why is different sound from, words? For this reason, because even if words are charged with a lot of layers of meaning, so you hear me say one word and you can contextualize it your own way, because it's very, very charged with meaning that coming from your experience, okay? So sound is more different, especially if it's not music. So we don't do music. We work with sound, harmonics, with intervals, but not with music. Because again, music is a language. Then again, is charged with meaning. That's why improvisation is very open. It's not every time is different, so you cannot point it to something like I don't know, Mozart or Beethoven or Rolling Stones or Patti Smith. You see what I mean? So they became, and also these meditation music with some water, some birds, some wind, or some drums, so is music at the end. So it brings you in a state of relaxation, absolutely. So it is meaningful, but is not the work that can be done if you stick with sound only. And this is what I do with Soundgate and with meditation.
I see. Yeah, it's interesting you said that music is closer to words because we have different perceptions already. So the focus is not on the sound, and also it's not on our own awareness. It's also an interesting point that you raised, that you think sound is for meditation, not for healing. Because now we hear so much like sound healing, working with cymbals or some other music instruments for therapy, for healing. Could you elaborate a
This is
little bit more on
the
that?
delicate is the delicate point. I always touch this nerve. The fact is that music has an important role also for healing. If you think of the shamans, if you think of the traditional Indian music, that is extremely connected with the elements, with the season, with the time of the day. You have the raga of the morning that is not the raga. And there is a lot of improvisation in the shamans and in the music, this kind of music. And then, so I think that in a Western music, this is slowly has been lost because us Westerner, we are more interested in ourselves. So, which is good. I want to express myself. I want to bring myself and my point of view and my sensitivity and sensibility to the public. Is a way of communication, of feelings, of emotion, of worldview. So it's greatly important. I don't want to demise. I say it's not. It's just different. And this discernment is extremely important. Discernment is all about this. So another thing is with music or with sound, or you can get extremely relaxed. Okay, and this relaxation helps to release tensions. Okay. And maybe something pop up like a memory, or maybe you start to cry, but is something that happens freely. So you cannot say that this is going to happen, because if I give you an aspirin or give you something, I say your fever is going to drop. Okay. But with sound, we don't have this cause effect. And in the holistic approach, and this is another contradiction, holistic approach is an approach that is not cause effect. Otherwise, it's not holistic approach. So if you say, with this note, you're going to touch this chakra and you're going to have this result, is a contradiction in terms. Because you want to stay in a holistic dimension, then you move from a completely different philosophical and frame, and practical frame. Is a different things. So if you stay to the holistic dimension, then you cannot act in a cause-effect way, which is much more reassuring. Because if I don't develop a certain kind of sensibility in the language of sound, okay, but to sound and to different pitch and different frequency, different, things. If you don't develop this and this ability to somehow respond to what you listen, not to what you produce, but what happens in the field, So it is, how can I say, it is limited, and it ends up in the system that is the system we want to leave to physicians, which they are very good in this, or scientists. Okay, everyone has his milieu, his technique is connected with a certain kind of approach and world view. So to be coherent with this, you have to know where you are and what you are doing and which instrument you are using and which property they have, which is lacking a little bit. It's more romantic approach, which, is nice, but, there is the problem in which you sell it as a healing and not as an experience, the putting contact with yourself. Then anything is important to go back to experience. We need in this world to go back sensory experience. Doesn't matter how, So with a gong session or with whatever, or with some gate with me in a more structured way. And I'm not the only one who works this way, but we need this. But the difference is important. Discernment is also important.
So there's also a creative and artistic dimension to your sound work, because you design and create your own instruments. I wonder Because you also mentioned that it is kind of a you need discernment, and also it's not like simple cause and effect. How do you sense that when an instrument is right?
Well, first of all, the instrument I use are the fruit of dialogue with Wolfgang Deinert. Our friendship is important because we can discuss, and he has a more specific experience in building this instrument and tuning this instrument. 90% of my instruments are made by him, all the brass instrument, all the gong chimes. And so when he's right, well, sometimes is not sometimes, I think most of the time is a kind of response to inner perception or need that is not only my need, but you perceive that there is, for example, when people start to be so interested in frequency and so interested in sound, there is something from the collective unconscious that is emerging. Why now? Okay. So, and why it became so spreading? No, it's not only about marketing, good marketing. Yeah, there is good marketing, whatever. It's true, but I think there is something deeper. And so we spontaneously respond to this something. So when I meet Wolfgang from time to time, there is always a kind of serendipity because I arrive with some question. What do you think about this or that, the connection with this and that? And in the same time, he was working on something similar. So we got deeper in our discussion, for example, with the Schumann frequency. There is a moment in which we talk a lot about the Schumann frequency. You hear about the Schumann frequency. And Schumann frequency is a very scientific subject, okay? Mr. Schumann, find this frequency that is due to the lightning that are happening on the planet, a lot of lightning. So this is a vibration that extends from the surface of the planet to the ionosphere. I don't know how you call it in English, but is this place where beyond this, the sound doesn't move anymore because there is no air. Okay. So this bubble that is around us, and so the sound bounces from the ground to the ionosphere and down. And these make a frequency this frequency is the medium, because it's not perfect 7.8, but 7.8 is the base of this frequency, can go lower or upper. Okay. So because it's so connected with nature, and we are embedded in many kind of frequency, many, okay? But each frequency is a little bit like the radio channel. So you tune to your channel, okay? And you listen. So our body is tuned to different frequencies, yeah? So this one, that is not fixed, I told you, is move, but the base is 7.8, has a lot to do with our body, with our brain waves, with our cells, with our well-being, okay? With our feet on the ground and our head in the air, you see? So it is all body. So, for example, we were talking a lot about this and how to create an instrument that was enhancing this frequency. So this was the way, for example, of this of the instrument that I use in Southgate. It is in Italy because it's a huge one. It's 3-meter high with huge chimes, because 7.8 is a very, very low frequency. You don't hear it. It's a vibration. So you make it hearable, but in the same time, you need the potency of the low frequency. So you need a big instrument. But this is how, for example, this instrument come to life, So you start to see the collective interest into this, and you know that it is important to connect to nature, and it's important to nourish the body with something like good air, good food. Also bring back to the body frequency that are a little bit more disturbed by all the other that are frequencies that we, I don't know, anything, all the AI things, all the satellite, all the Wi-Fi, we put a lot of extra frequency in the system. Like we put a lot of extra food that we don't need in our body. It's the same, it's just a bigger scale. So the instrument come to life in this way.
Nice. Yeah, now let's look at the broader landscape of these disciplines. Yeah, just now you mentioned the Schumann frequency and also Aurasoma. And the last time I also learned about Bach flower remedies from you. So there are just so many new methods have been developed or discovered over the, let's say, last decades. Or the different tarot decks. How do we discern what is meaningful and authentic rather than something that is simply invented or followed uncritically? And I have also been thinking about these questions in the context of holistic practice and also integral philosophy. Yeah, this is a big question for you.
It's a big question. Okay. It starts from how we choose from one technique to another, you know. I can tell you how I did. I told you, for me, it's very important to go as deeper and back in time as possible. Shatsu was, in any case, because it has a lineage. You know, it is a long things coming from China, going to Japan and coming to Europe in the 60s, in the 70s, okay? So it has a long lineage. And everything's in the holistic field that you can bring back to a long tradition. I think this is very helpful because you have you can refer to a lot of peer review, if you want to say it this way, because you have books, you have experience that has been passed, you know, from one generation to the other generation in a very consistent way. Some things disappear, but something stays. You know, also for astrology is the same things, you see. The psychological approach is, yes, it's Jungian, but if you go back to Marsilio Ficino in Renaissance, he was working with the Medici family, and he was going back to Greece and to Greek philosophy. And so, I mean, you can go back and you find deeper, sound, meaningful knowledge that change is not staying the same. It's not a crystallized, you know, because if you want to bring the same system of 500 years ago, it was addressed to people that were living 500 years ago. So it is changing, but evolving, maintaining a connection. So if we go, for example, for Aurasoma or Bach flower, these two persons, for Aurasoma, she was a chemist and she was also a theosophist. So there was, at that time, theosophy was very popular in Europe, okay, in the world in general, yeah, but also, you know, so in England, there was, you know, all these theosophical lodge and so on, you know. And so, again, you know, this is a lineage. So she was a scientist and a spiritualist at the same time. And so she was really trying to bridge the two dimensions. And the same things with Bach, you know, Dr. Bach, because he was a physician. He was a scientist. There are several things that are medicine that are, and research that are developed from him, and they have his name, especially now that we are so interested into gut microbiome, for example, you know. He was very specific in this, and he has his own theory, and he knows method that get his name. And this was beginning of last century. Okay, not this century, last century, 100 years ago. And so he go from being a physician and to work with homeopathy. And again, there he create some things that he still have his name. But then he wasn't happy to work with homeopathy because he says, I still have to use certain poison. And I want only to use the good aspect of nature. So he left London, he moved in the countryside. I think he was already 60 at that time. He left his practice, okay, and he started to experience nature. But with his sensitivity or sensibility, he had all the background, you know, be able to develop the Bach flowers. There are 38 different essence, different flowers, not all flowers, but mostly flowers. And so, I mean, this is the way for me, at least, it gives me, reassure me, I'm following inner impulse and a curiosity and inspiration, but I try always to ground it. And so to make always this, this way of going back and forwards, you see, from what I feel could be and what it is, and then, mix the two things. Because, and I close it here, and I go to the integral aspect, The point for me, after all the experience with my teachers, my mentors, the people with which I work, I didn't make the list, but I did many, many things over the years, okay? Especially in the holistic dimension. So what happened is that what I realized that the temptation, to make yourself big, happens because you have maybe a lot of eyes on you, and so you think it's because of you that this is so great, but it's not because of you. It's because the knowledge, you are bringing to people, and the most, I say, authentic you are in this, you realize that can be on the way, but not in a mystical way. It's really, you have to, like we were saying before, we don't want to pass on the spiritual bypassing. We want to go through a growing, sound psychological maturity in which you can see, when you are projecting your expectation, your dreams, your want to be unique, that we all have it. But you can project it or you can keep it for yourself, and be happy because you have good result. But don't focus and don't build, yourself as a guru or an influencer or those modern things. This is, for me, was very important because I was struggling with myself, of course, you see, because if you don't push yourself in the market, people think that there is a better one and there's a more famous one and someone who's successful and someone who is able to sell. But if you have time to do this, again, it's not a problem. Okay, but I didn't want to do it because I wasn't good in doing it. I'm not good
probably
still
you
now.
also don't believe in spending time on that.
Exactly. This is the very important thing. I have, so many books always with me. So many, constantly reading and listening to what podcasts and talking with, and then working, of course, and teaching. I mean, I don't have time to this, But what happened? It was in London, still finishing the CPA diploma, and there was one teacher that compared the work of Ken Wilber to the astrological chart, because there was a similarity, a point of contact. And so I went and have a look to his work. It was 2006. And I was really, mesmerized. But why? Because he was trying to bridge science and spirituality. And he had an incredible knowledge. He started when he was to write a first book about this when he was still at the university. He was studying chemistry and biology, and he wrote this book about the spectrum of consciousness. There was, an incredible explosion in the field, of spirituality and holistic studies. And from this book, he developed all this work that became the integral philosophy. And what was this integral philosophy? It was 5 elements, 5 tools that help you to avoid all these pitfalls, like finding yourself as a guru or not having enough depth and width. And so was so rich, that I wanted to study with him. And so I started to study in the Integral Institute, at the Integral Institute in 2007. I became a member of the academy. And I never stopped studying this because it's never stopped. I am a topographic person. I love maps, Astrology is a map, and the 5 elements in Chinese medicine is a map. And I don't know, the circle of fifth in music is a map. So all these maps for me are maybe because they help me ground my inspirations. Okay, so this map was the 4 quadrant map that help you to realize that in your life you can adopt 4 main perspective on life. And so is a very complex philosophical and explanation, but I dry it up into 4 words. So you have your inner dimension, that is your mind, your thought, your emotion, and you have your body. So physical, material, measurable dimension outward there, So there are these 2 dimensions, the inner mental dimension and the body dimension, physical action. And then we are not the only one on the planet. A lot of other human beings, and not only, a lot of other things. But I focus especially on the aspect of the others, So I'm not only one. I have a relationship with other people that they have their inner life, their own inner life. And when we meet them, we can be a conflict, or can be, an harmony, or can be something in between. But the relationship are basic to our life, inner relationship. But we also have outer relationship between our bodies, between us and nature. So for me, these 4 quadrants are about mind, body, relationship, and environment. These are the 4 keywords I use. I can speak hours about it, so I stop here. But what happened is that allows me to understand that holistic approach and integral approach are similar, but very different. Why? Because the holistic approach is more about being a part of the whole, okay? But how this relationship work is very fuzzy. We are all one. We are, is very fuzzy. On the contrary, with the integral philosophy, there is a very clear explanation of how, and also the different plans, of relationship. Okay. But because in our culture, especially since the 60s, very much suspicious of any kind of hierarchy, we end up throwing up the baby with the water of the tap water. Why? Because we throw away the natural hierarchy. So there are hierarchy of power, and this is the one we don't. But there are also steps or hierarchy, if you want to call them like this, or phases in the evolution, like from the seed to the plant. Okay, this is a natural evolution from a kid to an adult. Okay, this or from I don't know, approach that was very magical, mythical, to a different approach that we can have today. And these are all important. So what I learned as a kid is still very important, because I learned to walk, for example, or to talk. So these are all quality you integrate, and you evolve from this quality. So, Wilber say you transcend and include. So you transcend the phase in which you are a baby and have to learn to walk and to talk, but you include this ability and you build on top of this ability. So for me, again, go back to the 4 quadrant. Then what happened when you apply this to Soundgate? Okay. So you cannot avoid to think about this 4 dimension when you work with someone or with a group, okay, or when we conceive another instrument, because we all have this 4 dimension, okay, and so also sound has to take care of this, because when for example, I place my instrument, I always think about the setting. The setting is also very important, always, in psychological setting with your counselor or with sound. So there is the setting, there is the mind, there is the body response to sound, there is how you listen. So listening is about dialogue, because you don't have dialogue if you don't listen. It's a monologue, okay? But if you listen, it's a dialogue, okay? So the relationship, for example, between the the teacher and the student. This is one that the first come from the top of my head. This allows you to be more clear in where you are and how are these things connected, and you are connected with other. So it became more clear, and more balanced, more connected with nature. So yes, I have a lot of respect for my mentor and for my teacher. They cannot be different, I don't worship them, but I respect them, and they have an important role, and they had and they will, because I keep studying, important role in my life, But this relationship has to be balanced, and nature is the example. Nature is the perfect example of balanced hierarchy.
That's very interesting, but also very actually more complex than I thought. So, I mean, I can listen to
Yeah,
you
it
for
is.
hours, but to consider our limited time, I want to conclude with the last question, because you also founded Vita 4.0. Could you tell us more about that, and how does this method guide us in making modern life better and more meaningful?
Well, Vita 4.0 is the things I come out after teaching in the academy for 13 years. So during the pandemic, think, yes, we need a more different tool, not a 3-year things, That is important to become a counselor, integral holistic counselor. Okay. These 4 quadrants are awareness is extremely useful for anyone in any walk of life. Yeah. Because it's helping you in situate you better, okay, and orientate you better, because you don't forget one aspect of your life. Like, for example, I'm too much into mind. I don't, take care of my body enough, or I'm too much in the stress of my body because I work too much, and in the doing, and then my relationships start to be terrible because I don't have time, I don't have the focus, I don't have, the peace of mind that I need to have a healthy relationship, or very selfish about me and my body and my health, and that's it. And so the planet can go to hell. We see a lot this recently, that you can grab anything you want because you want it. Yeah. And doesn't matter, you throw the can of soft drinking and you throw it in the floor because somebody will clean it, not you. And so you don't respect the planet, but you don't respect your fellow human being. And so I think it could be extremely useful because it helps you to go from, well, we have to talk a little bit of psychology this. So evolutionary psychology teach us that we go 2 steps. We learn to be human being in a collective situation with others. Okay, we learn different way because of different culture. Yes, but there are some common aspect. And so in this process, we discover that we are not the center of the world at a certain age. And so we start to recognize the other as other. So this ability to imagine, put yourself in the perspective of the other person is the first step. And then it took a long time to settle. But then the second step, is also be able to walk in the shoes of the other person. So you develop this ability to walk in the shoes. So when you work with the quadrants, you move from the 2 quadrants of self and body to recognize that the other exists, and then to be able to be in the shoes of others. And the same happen with the society. I have a body, but what I do is happening in the system, in nature, in society. So this passage, they seem extremely simple, but they are not. There are people who are still in different stages, even if their age is different, and they experience difficulty in relationship, difficulty in their work, difficulty with the kids, with the spouse or husband or whatever, and they create a lot of obstacle also for all of us. So the quadrants help you to be aware. So Vita 4.0 in Italian, or Life 4.0, is to have a bigger context that you are aware of, and that you are moving in this bigger context. And in order to be more in peace with yourself, and then this has an effect in the rest of the world. There are these psychological passages that are not always complete properly. So it is a kind of upgrade of your cognitive system, And then also it's important to learn how to practice this, like I call it dynamic, because in reality, this is a map, is not a territory. It just give you a way, an extra way, a new, more articulate way of looking at life. But life is life. The quadrants are just abstract description. It's about awareness. The moment you became aware of this, and then you know how to keep this awareness online, okay, then you don't need to, it's like astrology. I mean, it's all the map. You don't need to look at the map every day, It's like you move in Hong Kong. You know the town. You need the map if you are a tourist, or if you go in an area that you never explored before. But then the moment you interiorize the map, you move around Hong Kong without map. Is this the same? So Vita 4.0 is Life 4.0 is just an upgrade of your cognitive system in order to be more more present, more aware, more respectful, and also have a better life, because you don't step on things that without knowing. It's more complicated than this, but I try to, in this method, I make it extremely accessible. So with a lot of practice. So this is the theory, okay? But the method is made of theory, and then a lot of practice, a lot of examples, and then a meditation. So it's always divided in three. You learn the theory, then you see it applied, and you apply it to your life and how to apply it. And then there is a step of meditation that is a kind of digestion, time to integrate. And then, again, theory, practice, meditation, theory, practice, meditation. And this is also one important aspect of my method that I stress it very much. I use these steps to help integrate.
Thank you, Monica, for this beautiful conversation and for opening such a fascinating field for reflection. It also reminds me of one of the most important concepts in Buddhist teaching, interconnectedness. I think you are really living and teaching this important concept.
Thank you very much for having me. I try to do my best to be clear, and this is a huge topic. Thank you, because this time with you was really important also for me. Every time you connect, something flourish.
Yes, and thank you for listening to Buddhaland Podcast. Wherever you are in the world, I'm grateful you showed up. Until next time.